What's up everybody, welcome back. So it's episode 16 already of the Mech multiplayer project, and today we're gonna add a game over screen. So by the end of the game the players will have a screen where they can choose if they want to restart the game or go back to the main menu and things like that. So that's what we're gonna add today, and that's also going to be the last episode of the basics of this game. So by the end of this episode we are going to have a basic game done with a very simple game loop and all of the menus in place and things like that. And the episodes that will come after this I consider the bonus episodes, where we're gonna expand on some more advanced stuff. We're gonna add new enemies, we're gonna add a secondary fire mode, we're gonna add a save game that saves the player's name and the scores for each game. So we're gonna make it a bit more advanced in the upcoming episodes, and that's why I consider those the bonus episodes. And after this episode we are basically done with a very simple game. So let's dive into it. For the game over menu, I'm going to use the in-game menu because it's going to be very similar. There's one thing I'm going to do. I'm going to add a text that says game over. So I'm going to select the title over here and simply duplicate it. And then we want to move it down a little bit. So I'm going to move it about 170 units down. And then we're also going to want to move the border a little bit further down, so let's do that right away. Let's make that something like 20, 30 maybe, something like that should do. So I'm going to change this text over here to game over, and then I'm going to change the shadow color to red color, just so it stands out a little bit more. And we want to rename it over here as well, so that's going to be the text game over. And then we want to make sure it's a variable. So on the top right over here, we're going to enable is variable. And let me get rid of the capital over here. Okay, maybe not. Thank you, Unreal. Oh, there we go. So with the text in place, we want to go to the graph and we're going to add a function in here. So let's create a new function, and that's going to be isGameOverScreen. We want to give this one input, and that's a boolean that tells us if this is the game over screen or it's simply going to be the pause menu. So let's call this isGameOverScreen as well. And then first we're going to add a branch in here, plug it in, and then we're going to say we want to create a variable as well, by the way. So let's do that first. We're going to drag off here and promote this to a variable and call this isGameOverScreen. That's fine. So we want to set that and then plug it in to the branch. So we have that stored, and then we want to hide and show the game over text. So we're going to grab the text game over here. And if it's the game over screen, then we want to set it to visible. So we're going to set the visibility, and for the true pin, we're going to make it visible. And we want to grab the button that closes the menu, and we want to hide that because this is the game over screen. So we don't want the players to be able to get rid of this. So we're going to say hidden and make sure we plug in the button to close the menu. And if this is the pause menu, then we want to do the same thing in reverse. So in that case, we're going to hide the text for the game over, and we're going to show the close menu button. So that's all we want to do in here. We can compile and save that. And then we want to go to the onKeyDown function that we created in the previous episode. And over here we want to make sure that if this is the game over screen, that the player won't be able to close it by pressing escape or whatever key you assign to it. So we're going to add a branch at the beginning over here, and then plug in our isGameOverScreen boolean. If this is false, then we're going to plug it into the isValid node, because then the player can actually close the screen using the button. And if it's true, we want to make sure that we hook it up to the return node where it's not handled. So let's make this look a little cleaner. There we go. So that's what we want to do for the in-game menu. Now we want to go to our Mech player controller. So let's go to the Mech folder and open the player controller. And in here we have the UI show in-game menu function. And in here we're going to add a call to the function that we created in the in-game menu. So we're going to go right after the add to viewport node, and we're going to drag off the in-game menu, and we're going to say is game over screen. So that's the function we just created. And then we want to plug this in over here, and we're going to make this variable an input. So we're going to drag it all the way to the beginning and drop it on top of the function node. So we have an input over here. Compile and save it, and then we want to go to the event graph, and we need to create a replicated event to show the game over screen to the players. So for the pause menu we didn't need to do that, because the pause menu is handled by pressing a button, and a button is always locally executed, the event for the button. So that's why we don't need to replicate it to the owning or the local client, because we already are the owning client or the local client when we press that button. But the game over screen is going to be initiated by the server when all players die. So then we need to have a replicated event. So we're going to create a custom event, and let's call this owner show game over screen. And we want to make this replicated to run on the owning client, and then I'm going to enable reliability, so it's almost 100% sure it's going to be executed. And all we want to do in here is call the show in-game menu function, and then we want to enable the boolean to tell us it's the game over screen. So that's all we want to do inside of player controller. So we can compile and save that as well and close it down. And the last thing we want to do is go to our BattleMechs game mode, and in here we want to create a function to check if the game is actually over, and then we are going to show the game over screen to all of the players. So let's go to the event graph, and we are on the event graph. So we have an event in here for when a player dies, so we want to look for that event. AI died, start new round, countdown over here. So event player died. And at the end over here, we're going to add a call to a new function that checks if the game is over or not. So we're going to create a new function, and let's call this check is game over. Oh, we already have that function. Oh, that's convenient. So we already used this previously, probably. Let me double check. Oh, that's for the find new player to attack. So we can simply drag in the check is game over function over here. And then we can add a branch. And if the game is over, we want to display the game over menu. So then we're going to grab a for each loop for all of the player controllers. So let's grab a for each loop, and we're going to plug in all player controllers. So the Mac player controllers. Oops. Thank you. And now we want to call the owner show game over screen over here and plug that into the loop body. And that's all we need to do. So now we can compile and save the game mode as well. And first of all, let's run a single player test, just because that's a little bit easier to do. So this should work. So right now, if I die, we should be presented with the game over menu. So let's just get killed really quickly. Oh, compiling shaders, that was a bad idea. Okay, so I died, and we have the game over screen, and now we can either choose to restart the game or go back to the main menu. And we are not able to close the game over screen by pressing escape, so that's good. Now let's try this in a multiplayer game quickly as well, just to make sure it's working. So we want to host the game and then find the game. And let's start the game. There we go. So now let's wait till both players died. Oh, that looks awesome. I think I turned down the scalability or something, I'm not sure, but I need to check that out. But that's not important right now. So when both players died, we have the game over screen. The client can only go back to the main menu, and the host can choose to restart the game, go back to the lobby, or go back to the main menu. So that should be good. Yeah, so that's pretty much all there is to the game over screen. Now there is one little thing I want to take a look at before we end this episode. And that's if we go all the way to the beginning of our game mode in the event graph. Over here for event begin play, we have the delay where we wait if all players connect, and if they don't connect within the connection timer time, then we're gonna start the game anyway. And then we have a 3-second delay over here to make sure that all of the players are actually loaded into the game, so that the player controllers are ready and we can actually initiate replicated events on the player controller and things like that. So I want to make sure that we get rid of this static delay over here and only start the game if all of the player controllers are actually good to go. And how are we going to do that? Well, first of all, we want to go into the actual player controller, and we're going to go to the event begin play over here. So we want to go all the way to the end, and let's see. So over here we have the local player controller branch. So what we want to do, we want to make sure that we add a boolean in here. So let's do that first. We're going to create a new boolean, and let's call this is controller ready. And we want to make sure that the controller on the server side is ready. So we're going to add a branch in here, plug it in, and we're going to check if we are the server. And if we are the server, we can simply set this boolean to true, plug it in and set it to true. And if we are client side, then we need to make a replicated event. So we're going to create a replicated event, and I'm going to call this server set my player name, but that's not relevant for now, that's for later, but otherwise we are going to have to rename it. So let's create a custom event, call this server set my player name. We want to make this run on server, and over here we're going to set the boolean to true as well, over here. And if we are a client, we want to call that event, so we're going to say server set my player name and call that function or event. So compile and save. So this is all the way at the end of begin play when we have the HUD added to the screen and we are able to initiate things from the game mode on the controller. So now we want to go to the game mode again, and in here we're going to create a function that counts the amount of controllers that are already loaded or ready to go. So let me switch my notes quickly. We want to make a new function for that. So let's create a new function, and I'm going to call this count loaded controllers. And all we want to do in here is grab a for each loop, and we're going to plug in all of the player controllers, so the Mac PC array. The first thing we're going to do is check if this current array element is actually a valid controller, or the player may be already left and this is just an empty spot. And after that we want to drag up here, and we're going to check if the is controller ready boolean is set to true. So we're going to do get is controller ready. Add a branch over here, plug it into the is valid pin, plug this one into the condition, and we're simply going to grab a local variable and increase that. So let's create a local variable, local controller, or let's make it local ready count. Why not? So that's going to be an integer. And then we want to increment the integer if the controller is ready. So we're going to plug that one into the true pin. And then from the completed pin, we're going to add a return node. And we're going to return the controller ready count. So the amount of controllers that are ready. Over here. Now we can go back to the event graph. And we're going to make this all the way at the end over here. So let's get rid of this weird loop thingy that I created. Oh, it won't let me delete the reroute node. Thank you. So before we start a new round, I'm gonna add a 1 second delay in here, and we don't really need it, but it's just a little bit, well, it looks cleaner to me if the game is on the screen for a second and then it starts by putting text on the screen and things like that. So you should not need this delay. It's not to make the game work, but I just think aesthetically it looks a little bit better. And then we're going to call our count loaded controllers, plug it in over here, and we're going to compare that to the player count. So we are simply going to grab a branch, sorry, and we're going to compare the ready count. So it's equal to the player count. So this will tell us if all the controllers are ready or not. If this is true, then we can start a new round. If this is false, we want to add a delay. So let's add a delay, and you can make it 0.1 or 0.2 seconds, whatever you prefer. I'm going to leave it at 0.2, and then we're going to loop back to the count loaded controller. So this is going to keep looping until all of the controllers are actually good to go. And then we're going to start a new round. So with this in place, we don't have the 3-second delay at the beginning of the game, and everything should work fine. So let's have a little look in a 2-player game, and let's make sure that everything is saved. Why not? So let's host and find the game. And let's start the game. And now you can see it immediately starts with the round 1 go, and everything is working as it should. So now we don't have any static delays inside of the game mode anymore that we actually need to make the game function. Now everything is going to be well, dynamically, sort of. So it's simply going to start the game when all the controllers are good to go. Okay, so it was a bit of a shorter episode, but that's all I got for you guys and girls today. So as I mentioned, in the next episode we're gonna start the bonus episodes, and the first thing I want to do in there is add the missile swarm. So that's a secondary fire mode where we are going to fire a whole bunch of missiles, and I can quickly show how that's going to look. So that's going to be a little bit more exciting. So over here, if I press the shift key, you can see the cursor change, and then the missile bots on the mech will point upwards in the sky, and then I can fire 5 or 6 missiles. It's actually preparing shaders, but you can see I'm gonna add a missile strike to the game. So that's what we're gonna do in the next episode. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a like, and I'll be back soon for more. Talk to you later. Bye bye.